Hello, everyone. I just wanted to, in this kind of first couple of weeks, go over some general thoughts and observations about human rights. Some of those things you are getting from your readings, but other points are just kind of things that I want us to think about as we have our discussions about human rights. This was also the task that I asked you to do on discussion board, on the discussion board, number 2. And a lot of you have brought up many good questions and points. For example, the TED Talk that I had you watching brought a lot of you to this thought process about birth certificates. And I guess, the next step of that was, if human rights provide protections to humans, maybe we need to ask the question of who is human, and more importantly, in what circumstances do we exclude some people from this definition of human and therefore from the protection of human rights. Other general themes that came from the discussion forum include the question of government. What is the role of government? Is government, I guess, part of the problem? Or is it part of the solution? Or is it a little bit of both of those? There were many other very good and strong points in your posts and in your comments and in your discussion, and I really enjoyed going over it. You can see my feedback, my questions in many of those threads. But here are a few other points that we should probably be thinking about when we come to our discussions about human rights. So, first of all, human rights, just using this term of human rights, it's a language, right? And these are concepts that can help us to discuss the issues of people and groups that are marginalized or not necessarily feel as part of the public, or people that feel that the law or someone in the authorities are not protecting their rights, their human rights, right? Now, whenever we are invoking human rights, we are by definition challenging power, challenging those that made the decisions that brought us to call for a grievance, to call out and say, I am injured, something is wrong here. By doing that, we are challenging power. So, thinking about human rights in more benign terms or as apolitical is probably not the right thing to do, because we are challenging power, and therefore this is a political act. Some questions that we should ask ourselves when we are thinking about human rights include, can we ever lose our human rights? If we say that human rights are applied to all people, to all humans, wherever, whenever, then is there a situation? Is there a group of people? Are there individuals who could lose their human rights? Can I do something that would exclude me from the group that is protected? And then another question here is that if I have a right, what does that mean? Who has the duty to fulfill that right? How do I know that my right is being violated? Who says that a certain behavior is considered to be a violation of human rights? Who makes the rules? Who makes the thresholds? Now, if we look on the origins, and chapter 1 that you read gives you some of that as well. We know that human rights, or the discourse of human rights, is grounded in this concept of natural law and natural rights. And then later on, we see liberalism and this idea of the rights of individuals and the rights of individuals that are divorced from their relationship with religion institutions. We are talking a lot of times in more historical times about the rights of men, written in the way that it's written here. And so what does that mean? Does that, who is a man? Does that mean no women, no children? Are all male adults considered men, or are they not? Some of the criticism of this whole concept of human rights and who is included and who is excluded come from different points of the political map. If you look at conservatives, they are claiming, like Burke does here, that rights are part of social order and they're not external. And so we cannot come in and claim that everybody all around the world should have the same human rights, because it is part of this social order, the social contract, and that social order and social contract are different from country to country and culture to culture. If we look at criticism that comes more from the liberal side, then, as Bentham is arguing here, natural rights are false and we need to codify it in law. So the liberal criticism is that there is no something that is, God-given or natural about human rights, and instead we need to create them. We need to have rules and laws that are helping us to apply and enforce those rights. And then there is the criticism that comes from radicals like Marx that ask the question of what does this all mean? All of those questions, or some of those questions that I introduced before. Can you lose your human rights? Can you stop being a human? Who is excluded and why are they excluded? After World War II, and especially after the Holocaust, the world, or the international community, kind of came together and says, never again. We will not have another gross violations of human rights as we saw during World War II. There was a lot of outrage. People could not believe that this happened to us, to civilized communities. But because there weren't any laws, then we went back to invoking and using this idea of natural law, of human dignity, of this idea that there is something very basic about human rights that, for a lack of a better expression, we know it when we see it. And then the next step from that on was this conversations about political equality. And this idea that we may not be able to provide equally to everybody or make sure that everyone's life are equal. However, we may be able to have equal respect, equal autonomy, equal choice, and therefore claim that we are providing for equal moral worth for people. If we are thinking about rights, what rights are there out there, right? So there are a few things that there are a few ways that we can differentiate between them. One is to break them into liberty rights and welfare rights. Liberty rights would be freedom of speech, freedom from torture, and where welfare rights would be the right to food, water, and shelter, or the right for education. There's also another concept here are positive and negative rights. And again, negative rights are those that you need to stop someone or stop an authority from doing something. And by providing that, you are providing for human rights. So again, freedom of expression, you are stopping the authorities from telling me, the individual, what to say and how to think, right? So that's a negative right. Positive rights would be rights where the authorities or somebody else needs to provide for people in order to assure them. So again, if we're talking about the right for education, then free quality education would be a positive right. And so, as I said before, all of these different questions are just kind of general questions as we step into this world and thinking about human rights in more of a comparative lens. This idea of, can we compare between places? Can we compare between the rights of different people in different cultures? And some of the points that I just introduced are those things that we need to think about when we are stepping into this conversation.